Now, you're all very welcome to the first event of the Sustainability Community Practice for this calendar year. So we have this event, which is how to shape your sustainability strategy and how that will shape the future with confidence. We're delighted to have quite a packed agenda for this session. But maybe just before we start, we'll have some just an overview from Peter, a bit of a welcome, and I know Peter is looking to give a plug to the national awards that are coming up at the end of the year. But the main body of this session is the presentation from EY's Climate Change and Sustainability Services team with Emma Flannery, Kevork Arslanian, and also then a fireside chat with Doraka Dennis, EY partner, and Donal Daly, CEO and founder of Future Planet. We're hoping that the event will last around about 45 to 50 minutes, but we really do encourage questions and answers from the audience. So if you want to drop something in the chat, or if you're feeling brave towards the end of the session, you can put your hand up and we can address your questions. But we might just keep the questions till the very end, just to allow for the guys to carry on through the presentation. But I think Doraka and Donal, you probably would welcome some questions from the floor as part of the fireside chat. So before I hand over to Peter, I just want to give a brief mention to the next event of the year for the EY-sponsored PMI Ireland Chapter Sustainability Community of Practice, and that's on green procurement, where we have Julianne Byrne from the Supply Chain and Operations part of EY. The event isn't yet up for registration, but will be shortly over the coming days. But just to really mark your diaries, that's going to be on Thursday, 19th of June, again with the lunchtime slot. So I might just hand over to Peter now, who wants to give a brief mention to the National Project Awards.
Thank you, Tom. Firstly, just like to say a very warm welcome to everyone. We're thrilled to be hosting this event as part of the Ireland chapter of PMI. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Peter Glynn. I'm the president of the Ireland chapter, and we're thrilled to have such an amazing team from EY here sharing with us this afternoon, but also have Donal with us from Future Planet. So a very big thank you to everyone for this amazing event that I'm very much looking forward to. I'd just like to share with you briefly. So you may be aware that we recently launched this year's National Project Awards. Now, this is the 9th year of the awards that we have been running it. We're really thrilled this year that we're going to be holding the awards dinner on the 6th of November, and that is also International Project Management Day. So it's really exciting that we can actually coincide the major event on awards with the International Day as well. So that's absolutely fab. So we will be very shortly launching the submissions for each of the categories. I'll step through these very briefly, but I would highly encourage you to have a very close look at these and really think carefully about submitting your projects for these, because this is an amazing way of actually recognizing your success on your projects. And I highly encourage you to have a close look at it and just to see the one that is most relevant to you, but also this is a fantastic way of actually getting the level of recognition that you deserve. So just very briefly here on the screen, as you can see, we have 7 main categories. We have everything from having PMO of the year to having a special category around e-health, and we have private sector, public sector. We also are continuing with the under 35 Changemakers theme from last year, and that was very successful, and we were thrilled with that. The special categories this year are going to be the future of work excellence. That is an award, and that includes AI, that includes the whole future of work, and that's a pretty broad topic around the future of work, but it's really, really important into the future of our profession. And then I'm also delighted that we're going to give every submission, it's going to have a second opportunity to have a competition for an award with the the submission that has the overall greatest compliance with the 17 United Nations SDGs, and that will be a second opportunity for every submission to actually win an award. So again, it's very much linking into the theme of this webinar, and I'm really, really pleased that we have this aspect into this year's awards. So very briefly in summary, just to highly encourage everyone to have a very close look at these and to have your submissions in. We should be accepting submissions from the end of next week onward. So we're very excited about it, and we look forward into your submissions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peter. And now I'm going to pass over to, I think it's Emma, who's going to be driving from here. So Emma, if you wouldn't mind just taking over sharing now.
Thank you, Tom. Great. So we'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today for this session or webinar on sustainability strategies. So I won't spend too long on the agenda. It's aligned to what Tom was showing earlier, but we'll provide some introductions and a really brief regulatory update. And then we'll go into the importance of sustainability strategies, as well as some key components for an effective strategy. But we'll spend majority of the time with a fireside chat featuring Donal Daly, as well as Dr. Dennis from EY. And then we'll spend some time on Q&A and then go through some key considerations and takeaways. So with that, I'll get started with some introduction. So my name is Emma Flannery. I'm a manager within EY's Climate Change and Sustainability Services practice. I was previously with our US team for 5.5 years and just joined the Dublin office in January. So I've experienced supporting clients across a variety of industries with sustainability reporting, sustainability strategy development, goal development, and just overall maturing their ESG programs. I'm also joined today with Dr. Dennis, who is the EY Sustainability Services Lead for Ireland and a partner within the Irish practice, and she brings over 25 years of experience advising both private and listed companies on sustainability strategies, reporting, and assurance. And then also I'm joined with my colleague Kev Ork, who is a director with the EY Climate Change and Sustainability practice. We call it CCAS because it is a bit of a mouthful. And he's been with EY for 15 years and is focused on sustainability strategy as well, reporting, and then also large-scale finance and reporting transformation programs. So moving on to the regulatory update. So won't spend too much time here, but the importance here is if people have heard about the omnibus, it's a simplification of the sustainability reporting and due diligence requirements for the EU. So a lot of companies originally were in scope, and with this simplification package, it's scaling that back down. So the numbers of companies that have to comply now has been dramatically reduced. But why this connects to what we're talking about today with sustainability strategy is that even with this regulation being scaled back, it doesn't mean that the importance of sustainability strategy has diminished. So while originally regulation was driving this agenda and that created momentum, right now that the external pressure has eased, there's still this need for a clear and intentional strategy for organizations to implement, regardless if regulation is gone. So the reasons for that we'll be exploring momentarily with Kev, but really just that key takeaway is just because it's not required now, it doesn't mean it's not expected. So a great sustainability strategy, what that does is it ensures that your organization is ready, relevant, and resilient, regardless of what policy is driving that. So with that, I will hand it over to Kev to go into the importance of sustainability strategies.
No, thanks, Emma, and hi, everyone. So what we will do now on this section, we'll talk about why we need a sustainability strategy. And on the next page, we can look at what are the drivers of an effective sustainability strategy. And I know we're talking about sustainability strategy today, but just wanted to note that more and more nowadays, sustainability is no longer a parallel initiative. So organizations not only should have a sustainability strategy, but they should embedded or closely aligned within their overall business strategy, purpose, and decision making. Just like you can't have a business strategy that doesn't embed digital and technology nowadays. So why do we need a sustainability strategy? The first one that you see on the left side of the screen is to support business resilience and risk mitigation. And most enterprise risk management frameworks or risk registers today recognize sustainability related risks. If you pick up a risk register of a company or a large capital project that you're managing, it's likely that they're going to talk about two things: climate risk, and that could be, for example, a risk of frequent weather events to your operations, to your projects, also related people, health and safety events to your customers, operations, and value chain, and ultimately leading to financial consequences. And the second piece is compliance risks. So they talk about impact of ESG regulatory requirements and compliance risks from that. For some industries, compliance risks will even mean losing the license to operate in the near future if they don't act today. There was a study done by EY that it showed that 70% of the executives expect sustainability and climate change to be related to be a risk to with high impact on operations. So having a sustainability strategy then will help you understand, assess, and mitigate those risks before they materialize and become issues. The second aspect is proactive response to economic and industry changes. And this focuses on maybe two things. One, on investors. So investors and shareholders are increasingly evaluating companies based on sustainability aspects. Based on surveys done by EY, 74% of investors conduct now structured methodical evaluation of non-financial disclosures. And the other piece is regulators. I know Emma mentioned CSRD, there's ISSB, and others are all asking companies to disclose and talk about their sustainability strategy, transition plan, and explain what actions and targets they have in place and how they're progressing against those targets. So it's important to stay relevant, competitive, and resilient in this rapidly changing world. The third aspect is competitive advantage in the market. And I would say there is two subsections within this. One is it provides open access to new markets and products. So if you think about electric vehicles, EVs, and what it's done to the automotive industry, if you think about organizations such as Oatly and how they've created plant-based alternatives to dairy milk and became a global provider in this area, or the other one that I like is Philips, how they're thinking more and more about subscription-based business where you can lease your light bulbs and appliances and then give it back in due course and get another one. This supports circularity, but also for them, this is retaining customers for long term. So new markets, new products, and then on the other side is increasing attractiveness to clients, customers, and workforce. So if you think about your customers, building trust, brand loyalty, differentiating your products, and keeping a competitive advantage. I know we still have high price elasticity, so most people are still not willing to pay significantly more for a more sustainable product, although the trend is going more and more that way. Consumers are making more conscious decisions when it comes to buying the products. And then for employees as well. So studies show that Gen Z and millennials are more likely to choose and stay with employers that demonstrate real environmental and social impact. This comes along with increased employee engagement, talent attraction, retention, culture, and sense of belonging. So, and then the last point on why we need a sustainability strategy is creating long-term value. We had once done a session where we invited CEOs, CSOs, CIOs, CFOs, all the executives from different organizations, and asked them to talk about what's important for them when it comes to sustainability strategy. And when we got to the CEOs, everyone said without exception, if we can't get green, if we can't get green if we're on the red, meaning we can't invest and become sustainable business if we're not profitable. We will just not survive. So the same applies to ourselves as businesses and project managers. When we think about our business case, we need to have some kind of a return of investment. So that's why thinking about value is important, and that could be through reduced costs, through sustainable practices, reduce energy consumption, for example, or circularity practices, reduction of water usage, less packaging, and also some people aspects like reduce cost of recruitment, more higher retention of talent. So that all leads to reduction of costs. But then also we spoke about earlier about increased revenue to new markets and products. So those are kind of the 4 pillars of why a sustainability strategy is important for our organizations today. Maybe if we move on to the next page. So now that we understand why we need, so if we have a sustainability strategy, what does an effective strategy look like or include? I know we have this circular diagram here. I'm going to start with the 8 p.m. and then move to the 6 p.m. clockwise on this. The first one is having a clear vision and sustainability strategy that enables the business and integrate it with the business strategy, and then clearly articulating that to internal and external stakeholders. Another one that's important is materiality-driven prioritization. So often a critical input to when we're building our sustainability strategy is performing a materiality assessment. So understanding what are the areas, what are the projects across the environmental, societal aspect that we have the highest impact, or that will impact us the most, leading to financial consequences or opportunities. Like, for example, do we significantly impact pollution because we're in manufacturing, transportation, or do we significantly impact circularity because we're in retail? For EY, as an example, one of our biggest areas is emissions through business travel. So we travel. And also we hire and serve people. So people aspects such as well-being, training, and D&I are important. So once you understand the areas that are important with this materiality assessment, then you can address those by developing a sustainability strategy that focuses on those areas. Now, let's say we have a vision, we have understanding of our material areas. The next piece is measurable targets, setting up policies, measurable targets, and actions to drive the strategy. So the targets or the metrics will help you understand where you are today and where you need to get to, which will become your target, and then track periodically your progress against those targets. Another piece here that's important, I would say, is timelines. So for your various initiatives within your strategy, having clear timelines. Some of them would be short-term, some of them would require more time to execute and realize benefits. If we move to the top right corner here, we see the governance and accountability. I think this is a critical piece. Establishing accountabilities and responsibilities top down. If you think about the boards of organizations, what is their accountabilities in terms of oversight around our sustainability initiatives, for example? And it goes down from there to sustainability committees, various committees that consult the boards, C-suite, middle management, project owners, and the rest of the workforce. If I can take back the EY example, let's say we have our strategy and we want to reduce emissions and reduce our negative impact from business travel. That can be set, and we could have oversight from our executives, but we need to set the responsibilities of various sub-service lines, teams, and even projects and individuals, so everyone makes better decisions more sustainable decisions and contribute to the overall strategy. Some organizations are more mature in this area, and they go as far as trying to link performance metrics to sustainability metrics. So link the remuneration to sustainability metrics and sustainability performance. The next piece here is long-term systems value creation. So as project managers, when you think about your business case for your projects, what's the top thing that comes to mind? It's often value for money. What's the return on investment, payback period? It's important also to kind of redefine the value a bit and recognize that financial capital is one dimension of a good business or a good project. And this all starts with recognizing that the business and projects depend on drivers other than financial. So when we think about value, we need to think about not only business and financial value, but also value to our workforce. Do we provide adequate wages, well-being, training, health and safety? Value for our customers. Are we providing innovative products, reusable, recyclable, longer life of products? Value to our communities, so less pollution, less waste, community engagements and well-being in areas we operate. And then value we provide to our planet and ecosystems, really protecting our planet and ecosystems. The last bit here is stakeholder engagement and communication. If I may add, I would also like to add change management to this as well. Any strategy as complex as sustainability would require a bit of change management. So once we have our strategy and targets and metrics and plans, it is important to communicate it not only internally to our workforce and C-suite, but also externally to our customers and other actors in our value chain. And then a lot of times in sustainability, I think there is a bit of a storytelling challenge on how you tell your stories, your sustainability story within your organization and outside, free of greenwashing, greenhushing, with full authenticity, transparency, to build trust. And even if we're not meeting targets and we have challenges, just be transparent about it and say, these are our challenges within our sectors, and this is what we're doing about it at the moment. So as you think about an effective sustainability strategy, it might be useful to think about those drivers and pillars and keep them in mind. So I want to give you a bit of a context on what a good sustainability strategy looks like before the fireside chat. So with this, I'm going to hand it over to you, back to you, Emma.
Thank you, Kev. So now we can move into the fireside chat with Jarka and Donal, and then we have some questions for Donal that we'll go through. But feel free to put any questions in the chat or raise your hand and come off mute because we'll go right into the Q&A. So Jarka, I'll hand it off to you and Donal.
I'm delighted to be here again at the PMI event. It's always great to be here, so I'm looking forward to those questions, because the last time I was here I got a shocking load of questions, Donal. I have warned you on it. They are a great crew. I am delighted to have Donal Daly here with me this morning. Just this afternoon, sorry, I missed the morning, we're now in afternoon. Delighted. Donal has a very interesting background. He is passionate about climate and climate change and technology, which is, for many of you in the PMO space, probably music to your ears as to how do you get away from the Excel spreadsheets, how do you get into doing things in a way a little bit more strategically, etc. Donal also is an adjunct professor in Cork and has had success of other businesses before he co-founded Future Planet. So really delighted to have you here, Donal. You're very kind to join us. I think we've had a few conversations in this space.
We have. My only fear is the enthusiasm that we seem to engender in each other will put some pressure on our timeline. So really happy to be here.
Fair enough. You're absolutely right. So look, as I say, great to be here. And I think, you know, the kind of the question I have from many people and just thinking this through is strategy and the role of the PMO can be quite challenging. And I know that as you think about your role within organizations, many of you here today, and you may feel a little bit challenged as to how that fits in to your kind of day-to-day agenda, and how you, if you're passionate about sustainability, can bring that to the table. And I know, Donal, you've talked quite a bit about the kind of a future fit economy and what that might look like. But when you think about that in practice, what role do you think sustainability strategy plays in getting it there? Because I think that would help people here frame their thought process as to how they might fit in too.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, and then I watched Kev's presentation just now, right? And he went through the steps of a sustainability strategy. And as you know, I've run my own businesses for the last way too many years, right? And I'm looking at that. If you drop the sustainability word out of each of those pieces, right, it's all about strategy, right? So I think that it's important when we consider, I mean, you or I could walk into most businesses in the world and we would say, we know what your KPIs are. They're going to increase revenue, they're going to grow profit, they want to do their customer sat, they want to do those kind of things. But what we don't necessarily think about easily, well, you will do it easily, but others, what are the pressures that are causing them to act and drive after those KPIs? And in reality, climate change and sustainability is probably the biggest pressure any of us have ever seen, right? So thinking about that as a context, as I'm developing my strategy and thinking of it as an integrated part of what I'm doing. So in reality, I'm doing business. Sustainability is an integrated part of what I do. It's not separate. As I think about my profit and my costs and my project timelines, I should also be thinking about my emissions and my social impact and my climate justice and those elements. And when I think about that, the thing I love about speaking to a project management group is it's actually all about execution. Because if we think about the way most businesses work in the world, we have the C-suite who think about things. We have the individual contributors at the end who do what the people in the middle kind of structure and guide, right? And very often it's the PM folks who focus on the execution and the measurement. And I think the future fit economy starts at an individual level, and it goes to a company level, and it goes to an industry level. And if we think about, we're trying to get a balance between future fit, in my mind, means we're using fewer resources than we are regenerating. We'll have seen the reports recently this week. Ireland is behind on its emissions and going backwards. Europe is actually positive about hitting its 2040 targets. So balancing, so to answer the question, I suppose, the future fit economy for me is recognizing that planetary resource is a resource, and we need to think about how we consume it responsibly, so that we have some left for people who come after us.
Yeah, and look, I think that is kind of a very difficult question for many organizations, because it does involve kind of rethinking, re-engineering slightly the process, and I suppose that's where the PMI community comes into its own as such. I completely agree. And it's that moment of challenging and saying, is there a better way of doing this? So I think this community has an ability to ask that question as you design and implement change management and programs in organizations. Not an easy question to answer, but I think is important. Personally, I always say it's important for somebody at the table to say, okay, before we sign this off, is this the most sustainable way of doing something? Is there something we could do differently, better to minimize resource consumption, etc.? So I think it's one that is, as you say, the individual asking that question. You mightn't immediately get the answer that you'd like to get, but at least posing the question sometimes starts that chain of thought, a chain of challenge. And I see that very much in my role advising clients and working across various sectors. I suppose the other thing I really experience, and I think many people in this room will experience it, or this virtual room, I should say, is when people talk about climate, we all think about risk. We all think about things that could go wrong. We see the negativity. We see, we talk about climate adaptation plans and risk management, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's a very natural human thing to look for what might go wrong. So, we're all, innately, we want to survive. We have an internal need to continue to thrive and grow and survive. And therefore we are risk adverse by nature as humans. And I think the challenge that I would have quite often with clients is actually, can we talk about the opportunities? What are the opportunities that reside within this new way of thinking? And, you know, how can people think differently to say, well, actually, here's an opportunity and what's it look like? And how can you start people on that journey? And I suppose you've obviously been on that journey. And I know your whole organization thinks about your role to facilitate kind of organizations going from kind of bringing their strategy to action to operationalize kind of sustainability in the business context without the S, but just strategy. So how did you get there in terms of moving from the risk to the opportunity, and how do you see that happening across your own kind of client experience?
I think, thanks. I think it's a really important question, because people do go to risk and they do go to emissions and they do go to GHG and they stop, right? And we know it's a much bigger than that, right? And so yes, I've personally been involved in a whole number of materiality assessments over the past while, right? So people are looking at impact and looking at risks and looking at opportunities. And it's really gratifying when you see the customer going, oh, but if we did it this way, we can get this opportunity here, right? It might be reduced cost. The obvious ones are things about reduced cost of energy, as an example. But the less obvious ones are about new product design that are using circular principles where they're saving money. The other things are about involving communities who get involved and delivering impact. And thinking about, it's for all the world, like, you know, I've run a number of businesses, and every year I did a SWOT, right? I did my strengths and my weaknesses and my opportunities and my threats. And it's kind of like no different, except that I think what's different in this case is the pace of change is extraordinary, right? It used to be the case that a market would come and grow and develop in a 10-year cycle, let's say, and now it's happening in 2 or 3 years, right? And things are happening. So, and the pace of change from the climate point of view is only accelerating. So if I looked back, I remember when the first climate action plan was done in Ireland, our need to change was running at, like, we needed to reduce things by 7% a year if you compounded it. Now we've gone backwards, and now the mathematician in me says it's probably about 19% a year now, right? Because the later you start, the harder it gets, right? And what people are finding on the corollary of that, we're seeing people who move early and understand that they can rethink their value chain, they can re-engage their suppliers, they can do all those kind of things. They're now getting that compounded positive impact from opportunities much earlier, but it's doing the strategic exercise, thinking about all the different impacts that apply, and that's what we're seeing happening.
So you brought back a memory of many years ago doing a strategy with the client, and they were looking at those levers and the 7%, and they were like, oh, the first 7%, I can see it happening. The second 7%, yeah, I can kind of get there. I can see a few things we can do. And as the years went by, that the fear of the blue sky of not having the answer was actually their biggest challenge. And I can vividly remember sitting with the executive saying, that's okay, because we don't have all the answers yet, and this is evolving incredibly quickly, and it is. And I suppose one of the things that Kev mentioned earlier on, I think, is another particular challenge that this community may have as well, is that there isn't very much price elasticity when it comes to actually the end products. Like, we're not seeing that shift to accepting and absorbing incremental costs, should there be any, depending on the sector you're in. We're seeing people say, oh yeah, I would like it to be like that, but I don't want to be at a bigger price. I don't want to have to kind of absorb something differently unless it gives me a differential value at the end of my value chain. Do you know what I mean? So there is that context that I think from a commercial perspective that many are quite challenged by in terms of how to move, how to turn the dial.
It is, but when we think about the fact that customers don't want to buy from companies who are selling products that kill people, let's just take that as a broad speaking statement.
That's nice,
right?
Right. Not that we're being dramatic, ladies and gentlemen.
No, but I say that because the competitive advantage that Kev mentioned earlier happens when people are choosing products that are alternatives, right? Because of those reasons, either because they have less embodied carbon or because they're less damaging on the planet, and my little bit of melodrama just to add some color, right? But the point I'm making is any organization who's trying to generate revenue will generate revenue from their existing customers 7 times more easily than from new customers. So when you lose a customer because they're choosing a more sustainable product from someone else, you just built a really big hill to climb. So that kind of happens, and understanding that is important, you know. So it's maintaining customers.
Absolutely, and I think that's another piece when we think about strategy. And I think Kev very nicely talked us through that wheel of strategy. Is you consider when you're developing your strategy, it really should be outward looking as much as inward looking in terms of your capabilities and resources. And again, I think that's something incumbent on this community to kind of make sure it's at that table and it's being challenged, because you know, it's all very well to say something looks good to me and I am happy with it. But if your consumer on the other side says, oh, that's great, but actually I don't relate to any of that. And that's for any strategy, obviously not just sustainability strategy, but I think this is one where, you know, again, we would see often the stakeholders that you might consult as you consider a refreshing of a strategy that kind of has a sustainability lens would be broader and more kind of embedded across your value chain. And then you might at a corporate strategy level, because you might rely on just different levers there to kind of develop it in the absence of thinking about sustainability as a particular. And for me, I don't really like the two to be segregated. I'm going to be quite honest with everybody. We talk about strategy and sustainability strategy as if they should be different words and different worlds. They're not. But I do appreciate for many the journey is just beginning. So as I think about kind of people thinking about embedding sustainability, I think that we have to acknowledge that depending where you are on the journey would depend how integrated the two are. But there are different stakeholders. So for me, the other piece that's kind of critical as people think through developing a strategy is how different people being incorporated and how the voices that are relevant to your sector, to your business community being, I suppose, considered. Because they don't necessarily mean you have to talk to everyone, but you have to consider resources that might give you insight so that you're reflecting as best you can what their ambition is and what their appetite might be, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's and Kev mentioned it at the end of his thing, the change management piece, right? The change management piece. If I want to move my organization a little bit, I need to paint a vision. I need to role model. I need to show some quick wins. I need to understand, help people understand and involve them and get their opinion, because most of the time we learn a lot when we get people's opinions. And when particularly, and you will know this well, doing that kind of materiality process, we're looking at risks and opportunities on the business, but also impact on people and planet from the business. Then getting other people's opinions on that, where they go, that's not what it looks like from here. That's not how I think about it, you know, and getting those opinions and having people be heard and know that they're heard, and you learn stuff and they get engaged. I think that makes a big difference.
Hugely. And just again, like thinking that through as well, like, so another thing that I'd love to ask is, because I'm sure you have a view on this, is when you've worked with different clients over the last couple of years, you know, what does good look like when it comes to this whole topic? Like, so where, you know, put your cap on at the various clients you've dealt with, where do you think, as we stand back, you've seen it look, you know, really good in embedding of sustainability strategy, and what made it, do you think, what made it good? Like, what were the features that led to that?
Yeah, so I mean, we do, and I think, you know, we do work with a company called Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise. We do it across 50 countries across the world. We effectively were doing their sustainability strategy that became their business strategy because the CEO wanted it to be that way, right? And then all the pressures that get pushed up and down, right, make that happen. But what they did, I would say, in an unusual way, they took a whole bunch of people, kind of to your last question, a whole bunch of people from across the organization, and they effectively said, can we put these people together and build a little MBA in sustainability internally in the company, and then these people would run it. And they kind of trusted first and proved later, which is kind of interesting, right? They kind of gone, we're going to trust our people. We're going to trust our partner will help on them on the journey. And they reinvented their business with a sustainability lens, and it's wonderfully gratifying when you see what happens. And then their typical financial metrics go off the charts. Great, right? We're 3 years on that journey, so that's what's really good. In other situations where the head of sustainability can identify ways to bring the team on board. Collaboration is really important. Distributed or devolved engagement, and getting the company or the people or the divisions to understand it's not an adjunct, right? It's a new way of doing business. It's how, when I'm doing procurement, which is a key aspect to all of this, that I'm asking my suppliers, what are you doing that's helping me delivering better solutions to my, to my customers? So I suppose CEO involvement is huge. Embedding it in the organization is what makes it kind of come alive.
You know, and I would completely agree with you. I mean, I think I have this thing where I would often say to clients when I first started working in the world of sustainability and kind of pressing on doors to kind of people to think about it differently, that, you know, Johnny was out in the porter cabin and he was sustainability lead. He wasn't called a CSO. He was called the kind of, you know, the sustainability support person, manager, whatever role he was given. But he was very much out in kind of not necessarily at main office, and bringing that person and that role into the business and being a core part of the business. So it's kind of great to hear you saying that as well, because I do think for everyone here today, hearing that kind of thing, like, who is that person in my organization that can help create that embedding and bringing it to the operations and operationalizing it, I think is probably what you create a successful program for any of the team.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things as well, though, because I think that in some cases, to bring people on the journey, you need a combination of inspiration and education, right? Because people go on this awareness journey, and so if people listen to you in an organization, Dorka, and they haven't understood this, they'll go, oh, I didn't think about that, and they get inspired to do stuff. I think that's important.
Yeah.
And I think helping people, one of the things early on when I was involved in this, I was looking at you'll be familiar with the seventh generation principle from the Iroquois Indian tribe, North America, where every decision they made, they were doing it as, what's it going to look like 7 generations hence, right? So what's it going, so, and people, we don't have 7 generations right now on our current kind of plan, but if we kind of think about this, looking out, what does this mean for all of our stakeholders longer term? And most people want it to look well, and then they think about it, and it influences how they think. I think is so it's a combination of, I think, the inspiration and the education and the motivations, And
I do think when you humanize it and it becomes relatable. I know certainly we in EY have this 4 Futures event that we have, and one of the things many people say to me is the moment you project a child's face onto that story, all of a sudden it was my child, it was my grandchild, it was my nephew, it was my next door neighbor, and it became very real. So I think that is absolutely kind of an opportunity for us all. How do you personalize it so people actually can get on board, and also how do you give people the opportunity to relate to it? Because again,
people come out of your 4 Futures thing and kind of go, oh, I need to think differently. Which is part of it, right? Everyone goes on this kind of, awareness, interest, preference, action kind of phase, right? So I think that's important.
Again, I think, it is one of the challenges is if your project is about, it's seen to be driving a particular agenda, and then you're saying, well, actually, that's fine, but where does sustainability fit in that? It can be a difficult conversation to try and make people make that connection. So I think one of the things that I suppose is interesting is to think about, how can you empower people in businesses to kind of be able to move forward in that conversation? And are there things that you've seen that worked really well in terms of empowerment?
I think getting bottom-up collaborative teams, so again, I'll get back to the Alcatel example. They came up with fundamentally 8 key strategies for their business. They then put it in their different divisions in the business, and then the divisions in the business owned it as part of their business. And they were kind of almost competing with themselves as to who could be more sustainable, So empowering the people to do it, because you can't do it all top down, because it's everything that you do. It's effectively a better way of doing business, of doing better business. So it has to be at the folks in our world. We enable a lot of that with technology, as you know, but it's got to be driven by the people wanting to work together to get the outcome.
And I'm glad to hear they haven't been let down here. There's a couple of questions that have flown in as we've been chatting, and I'm going to just call them out to you there, Donal. There's one. The first one is the future of work was mentioned at the top of the meeting. How do you envisage the role of tech to forward sustainability in business? It's
what's really funny for me is because I'll end up speaking to a lot of kind of C-suites, as you will, and CFOs, and they go, should have tech be involved? And I go, well, how do you do your financials, or your ERP, or your HR system? And they kind of go, oh yeah. And I go, this is the biggest business challenge any of us will ever have faced. So having an operating system for sustainability integrated to the rest of your systems, I don't know how you do it any other way. We've had this conversation before, right? So it's, how do you do all the maths you have to do? And how do you distribute and connect all the people you have to connect? And how do you keep track of it and do all the things you're supposed to do without tech? I don't know. No, I'm a completely tech biased person. This is what I do, but I don't see that there's any other way.
I'm completely with you on this. And some people might call me a Luddite from time to time. I shouldn't really confess that, but it is true. I love the use of tech, but how it comes together is a little bit of a challenge to me at times. But I do think, practically speaking, technology will enable faster thinking. I think AI is going to be super, and it is super already. It's having a real role in terms of enabling information to be accessed faster. It doesn't give us all the answers, but it gets us to a point where we can actually discern and make judgments, which I think has been fantastic for many of my clients, and I see it as something in the future that people will obviously lean on. I don't think it'll make all the decisions. I think it just help us make better decisions. So
I think that's absolutely right. And we don't want it to make all the decisions.
Yeah, no. I'd be out of a job.
Well, yeah. I mean, as you know, you might remember. So I started my first AI company in 1986, right? Which many of the people on this call may not have even existed, or at this point. But it's all about effective AI has been always when there's a human in the loop. Always, and because. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
I have a few more questions. I'm going to try and stick to the order of them if I can. There's another mention in terms of the using of resources in ways that ensure something is left for those who come after us. What practical strategies can organisations adopt to not just conserve but also regenerate resources for lasting impact? It's a great question.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot in that question. So I think the regenerated question is a big topic. Right, and let me just talk about the easier piece, if I can, for a second. Right, so if I think about circular, I'm talking about all the R's: the refuse, reuse, repurpose, reimagine, recycle, all those things. So to make sure that there are adequate resources left for those who come after us, the first thing we should do is we should refuse. We should say, do we actually need to do this at all? That's the most sustainable strategy. Do we need to, because everything we do, even going on this call, having a cup of coffee, walking down the road, everything consumes resources, and there's a limited amount of resources. So circular strategy needs to be a core part if you actually really care about resource, particularly if you're in what I call a dirty industry, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it explains like manufacturing, agri, construction, those spaces. There's lots of great opportunity. The best way that I've seen happen on this is if people dig really deep into their supply chain and look at their value chain, because in most cases for companies that fall into that kind of category, they're going to roughly spend 70% of their top line on what they're buying and follow the money, right? Because they can if they do sustainable procurement well, they will reduce their spend, and consequently they will reduce their emissions. And the companies I see who are doing really well are now co-creating with their suppliers all the way through the supply chain to say, what my customer needs at the end of the chain is this. Let's figure out how we can do that sustainably. There's a lot going on in the regeneration space, and I won't spend time on here. There's people using mycelium to generate new materials. There's people doing new stuff around some ocean-based generation stuff. It's a big topic. I'm not hugely qualified on it, so I won't go there. But I can put people in touch with people who are hugely qualified.
It is still the interesting thing there, and I think I just want to emphasize this because I think the one thing that is going to get us to where we need to get to is collaboration, and I think that collaborative mindset and adopting that as organizations. I mean, I've seen many clients who kind of just leapfrogged where they might have got to on their own just by having an honest conversation, and I think that also has to have its role from a kind of an opportunity for everyone to think who are the potential alliance partners for them, how do they think about things differently across that value chain in particular. Conscious there's loads of questions coming in now, and I'm never let down by this crew. Let me just see now, there's another one here. I've lost a little sight of a few of them. So what's this? For Donald, I'm just wondering if current economic pressures continue for a while, do you think we'll see more delays or hesitations around sustainability regulations and initiatives in Europe? Well, I'll kick that one off first to give you a chance to rest there, Donald. I think at the moment, like, it's funny actually that there's very much an agenda at the European level to keep going. The Commission has said that they would like, they've charged EFRAG with rewriting the sustainability ESRS standards and regulations, and would like a finished version of the revised standards by the 31st of October. We know that EFRAG kind of pushed back a bit in May, that there's not enough time in the process for consultation. But there is still very much an ambition to accelerate. And I was speaking to somebody on one of the boards last week, the board of EFRAG, and saying that that's still their ambition. So I think we're probably going to see an element of delay, but there's no one owning up to that yet. I think for those of you who are in multinational organizations that have non-European parents, there is complete silence with regard to what non-European listed or parent headquartered companies will have to do. There's been kind of a pause on that in terms of any communication. So I think that's the one area personally that I feel it would be reasonable to give an accommodation and extra time to. But I think for me, for those clients, I find they're all just leaning in on their strategy, saying, right, we don't have to do a regulation, but actually we need to think about how do we meet our targets? How do we continue to evolve to be kind of a better and less impactful organization? So I think the regulation will come. The timing at the European level, they're still insisting that the omnibus timeline will be respected. But I think there are definitely challenges with regard to practicalities, and particularly, geopolitical pressure at the moment might push things back. But that's not what the Commission is saying. So I'm not quoting anyone from the Commission. Don't know whether you want to add anything to that.
No, I mean, the compliance drivers are diluted right now. The business drivers are accelerating. The financial institutions are going, whatever the regulators say, we still want data. The business communities are pushing back against the regulators' dilution, right? And it's a bit like going, we wouldn't do, so people don't set out the start of the year to write their financial accounts. The financial accounts tend to be a report on what they did. And that's how I kind of like to think about the regulation stuff. Is it should be a consequence of the good actions that I take that makes my business stronger. There's certainly, I mean, it's tough out there right now because with the various pressures that are coming from across the water and various other places, people have lots of stuff to worry about. But to do the cliche, there's no profit on a dead planet, right? And if you have products that are not sustainable, people won't buy them irrespective of what the regulation says. So the strategy still has to happen.
Totally agree. Another question, I'm going to take two more questions. I'm conscious of we're running out of time. There's one here, Donald, that kind of for your memory bank. Since you started your company in 1986, how have AI's capabilities and energy use changed, especially in supporting sustainability strategies today? So where have you seen that? How have you seen that evolution?
So the big change has been the power of processing, fundamentally. I mean, basically AI is just doing a lot of maths really fast, right? And so that has changed. You're putting the good and the bad of it is the good of it is AI in my mind is effective when you can take the knowledge of experts and make it available to non-experts to apply to problems that they're trying to solve. That's my kind of definition of AI. That's what it was 40 bloody years ago, nearly, or whatever that was, right? I know, and the reality is that that's something that people can do much more easily today. They're very powerful tools, right? The problem with it is, as I say, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? So in that it's much easier you can screw up much more quickly. I think that there's a lot of research that can be done really quickly, supported by AI. OpenAI, who folks would know would be the people behind ChatGPT, with their latest model, by their own admission, they say it's right 30% of the time. Right? So when you're making, I mean, it's really cool to go and read your document and make sure you have no typos, right? That's really good, right? But when you're using it to make strategic decisions, then that's something that needs human in the loop. I think it's really helpful. I think it needs to be used with some guardrails, and someone needs to go, does this actually make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. And so I'd be a big supporter of it, but I do think those guardrails and caution are really important. I have a question here for Kev, and I see his camera's on, so that's only fantastic. So there's a question here for Kev, and I'm going to throw it to Kev first, and then Donal, I think you might want to jump in as well. So it's somebody who's doing a master's in project management in Limerick, so delighted that you're on the call. And one of the a couple of questions based on the experience of kind of an academic project focus on sustainability. And the first one is, I'm going to go with the second one first, actually. Kev, you mentioned many organizations are now required to report sustainability metrics that they haven't previously tracked. What are the biggest challenges you're seeing when it comes to building reliable data systems from scratch? And how can early career project professionals contribute to that process?
Yeah, sure, Dorica. I think if we think about financial data, organizations have a kind of a well-trained engine on how to gather data, collect, and put the controls around it. If we think about ESG, I think the challenges are having a clear data, what we call sometimes data profile. What is the definition of the data? What are the assumptions used to come up with these KPIs? What is the hierarchy? And then second, thinking about where is this data? Where is it? Is it in our own operation? Is it outside of the operations? If it's in our own operations, who owns it? And does the person who owns this data understand why we need and how and when we need to capture this data, and set up the controls at that stage, so we're gathering kind of high quality data documented with the required evidence as well, if we need to audit those metrics. The other big piece is obviously gathering data outside of our organization. So across our value chain, a lot of our ESG data comes from our suppliers and customers. Not every actors within our supply chain might be collecting that data and will have it available to us. So in some cases, it could be completely absent. In other cases, even if they have data, just aligning on their assumptions, their ways of coming out with that data is important. And the last bit is, once you gather the data, so what? You have to report it somewhere if there is a CSRD or ISSP, but then really embedding it into operations and saying, what insights are we getting from this? What's the change from one year to another? And how can we use this data now that we're reporting to make better decisions, smarter decisions, and create those opportunities into those operations? So these are some thoughts in terms of challenges and what we can do.
I love your so what. I'm really conscious that there is it's now 2 o'clock and we promised everyone we'd be gone in 45 minutes, but Donal did predict the two of us a great deal of chatting. I just want to say, I am going to close because I'm conscious people might need to go back to lunch. I want to say a huge thank you, Donal, for you joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I know we'll be doing lots more chatting. Kev, Emma, Tom, and everyone, thank you so much for joining us and for staying the course. There are some fantastic questions there. So what I'll do is I will say to Tom, if there's anything that we can kind of feed back through the PMI network, that we would be delighted to do that in terms of any other information. It's been a pleasure to have you all today. Looking forward to our next sustainability session with Julianne in June. Please come back. Please continue asking those fabulous questions, because without those questions, we wouldn't be able to think about how we move this whole agenda forward. So it's been fantastic. Tom, I'm going to hand over to you to close, maybe with something else you'd like to add.
No, I think just listen, thank you so much to everyone who contributed to this session. I know Donal and Dorica, that was fascinating to hear your insights, and also then Emma and Kevork to hearing your pieces as well. That was really so very interesting. And thank you everyone who dialed in over the lunch break. Really appreciate it. And as Duraka said, we have our next event coming up on the 19th of June. So we'll be getting that on the website very shortly, and we'll be open for registration. So we look forward to the next event. Thank you all.